And we're live. Jordan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Coming at you from smoky Portland. We're looking forward to the sun eventually coming out.
Yeah, it's a wild time right now with that. I know that I moved out of California recently to Texas, and so I was primarily thinking about California getting hit with the fires, but is it impacting you guys pretty heavily as well?
Very much. We were primarily thinking about California also, and then next thing you know, it
Yeah,
came up here, and then it stayed. So
yeah.
we're like day 5 or 6 of not seeing the sun, and we're
Really?
ready for it. Oh yes,
Holy
yes,
crap, that's
yeah.
horrible,
It's
man.
it's it's a lot, and like my whole team, you can just feel stress. I mean, look, I have
Yeah,
3 kids. To see my 4-year-old with like a hollowed out look on her face is not comfortable. And at the end of the day, I find myself like anxious, and it's no wonder. I'm just
yeah.
the experience is very intense.
It is, man. And all these things are so much harder on the kids, and it's as a parent, it's so hard, whether it's the COVID stuff, the remote schools, all this stuff is like, it's so hard to see your kids struggling with stuff that you just wish they didn't have to go through.
Yes, and quarantine up until now has meant a removal from public life, but our private life at the house
Is
kind of
cool.
carried
Yeah.
on and taking
Yeah.
walks and going to the park.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
now like quarantine inside of a quarantine, where now feels like the Manhattan
Yeah.
experience of you're on the 18th floor and you really can't really leave your apartment very much. So
Yeah.
we're ready
Yeah.
for that to be done.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it's tough.
again,
Yeah. At the end of the day, you just gotta figure stuff out. I mean, everybody's trying to adapt in different ways and kind of do the best you can. I think I saw one of your tweets that you were thinking about, not necessarily thinking about moving, but like maybe like just entertain. I don't remember what the specifics were, but it's like, man, how much longer can we deal with this kind of a thing?
yeah, I think the tweet was about the ability to kind of keep one's like act together being
Oh
a
yeah,
competitive
yeah,
advantage. And
yeah,
and I don't know how it came off, but I actually wrote that from a position of like strength. I was like, because I feel like I'm doing a relatively good job of keeping it all together,
yeah,
and that felt like, oh, I'm happy I'm doing that, because if I were kind of falling apart, that would be much harder. My
yeah,
concern now is predominantly for the individual team members.
yeah.
um, we're just having a very intense experience on the business side because of this new partnership with Shopify.
Right.
And so to go through that, in some ways, it's an escape from the intensity of the real life. So we kind of laugh about that at
Right.
our
Right. Right.
weekly happy hour hangout. Is really, what TV shows are you watching? How's everyone doing? What's everyone cooking? And then jokingly, like, well, at least work is cool because real life is pretty boring right now.
Yeah.
So we're finding some solace in the
Yeah.
intensity,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
is a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot. So I'm checking in often to
Yeah.
see how people are doing, like
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
on a human level.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I'm curious to learn more about Carthook, how it all started, the team, how you guys are, structured, how you guys are doing. But congratulations on the Shopify thing. That's a huge deal to be partnering with them with the new native checkout support and stuff that they're going to be doing. So that's really cool.
Yes,
Um,
there's a lot around that. It's been a wild ride.
yeah,
We did not really anticipate this version of the startup journey when we launched it. We looked at it as, we see a problem we want to solve. We think there's an opportunity. We think the Shopify checkout is a bit rigid. And from my experience running an e-commerce company prior to Carthook, I know there's value in optimizing the checkout. I know there's value in optimizing everything, especially the point of checkout. And so we just set out to build a customizable checkout for Shopify. A bit naively, the truth is we would never have launched it unless without their launching of a checkout API.
mhm,
So their checkout API, this is like 4+ years ago, their checkout API made possible, at least conceptually, the ability to run a checkout off Shopify, but put the payments through their payment processor.
right.
And that's when I saw the potential of, oh, now we can build a customizable checkout, but we won't be taking payments off of their platform, so they'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
That turned out to be wrong. And they actually they asked us to switch it and build it through the orders API, meaning we would do the payment processing, and we were
Right.
puzzled by that, but we
Right.
did it.
Right.
And that's kind of what started the whole journey. And I don't think they anticipated the popularity of, yes, what we're doing, but more than that, just the trend of marketers and digital marketers pushing into physical product sales and bringing a lot of the strategies with them from the digital marketing world, including post-purchase offers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that took on a life of its own, and then we grew very quickly, even though we were outside of the Shopify app store, and we were on the outs for years.
What do you mean by
And
on
so
the outs?
we weren't allowed in the Shopify app store.
Oh, okay.
We were not supported. we were on the outs. We were on the black market, man. We were on the outside.
Grata. Yeah.
It was very awkward and scary, and the whole deal is.
Yeah.
I minimize it and I'm laughing about it now, but it was a very challenging experience overall.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a tricky relationship, as platform companies grow and they have an ecosystem, and then the dynamics change over time as what the platform needs, what the ecosystem needs. It's kind of a tricky dance. But everybody's trying to, at the end of the day, make things work for the customer and doing the best you can. So that's interesting. I guess you've kind of come full circle now to being able to do the credit card processing through them with these new updates.
That's right. What this partnership really is, and it's not just us, it's a few other companies as well. I like to think that we're leading the charge on the upsell side. But what it really is, at least from my point of view, right? If you think about our job strategically when we started the company, when we started the product, we were first a customizable checkout, and then immediately heard from our customers that they wanted post-purchase offers. And then those two combined is what really took off. And so we saw it as our job to turn post-purchase offers into a best practice.
Yeah.
It's so straightforward. You know what it's like? It's like abandoned carts.
Yeah.
And so Carthook, the reason it's called Carthook is because the first product we launched was an abandoned cart app.
I remember.
Yes, it captured emails, and then it sent out an email campaign designed to bring people back to finish their purchase.
Yeah.
When we started it, at least once a week, we would get some angry message about this should be illegal. This is spam. I can't believe you're doing this. I don't want to do this to my customers. Go to hell.
Right.
Within 2 years, we never heard that anymore because it became a best practice.
Right.
And it became a best practice because if you don't email your abandoned carts, you don't make that money. If you email them, 20% of them convert. It's like straightforward.
Yeah.
And we saw post-purchase upsells the same way. If you don't make an offer post-purchase, you don't make that money. If you do, about 20% accepted, you make more money.
Yeah.
So with that like little secret, we knew it was going to become a best practice, and we saw it as our job to take it from the digital marketing world, which was arguably a little sleazy, and pull it out into the direct-to-consumer world. Right. This was being done in ClickFunnels with free plus shipping offers and hidden subscriptions, and like it was hardcore. We wanted to pull it out and bring it up market into the direct to consumer space. Yeah. And I'm proud of the fact that we did that. We went from working with the drop shippers coming over from ClickFunnels, nothing against them. And then we ended it with Native Deodorant and Goalie and Magic Spoon and all these great brands.
Yeah.
And what I see happening now with Shopify is them really admitting that fact. Yes, this is a thing that people want. It's not just the drop shippers. And so let's make it work. And so what I give credit to Shopify for is at the end of the day, they're going about it the right way.
Yeah.
Right. They're not looking over what we did and like launching their own. They are working with the right partners. They're bringing it into their native checkout, and it is going to be an enormous incremental value add to the entire network. Yeah. And we played a role in that, which is something to be proud of.
Absolutely. I mean, and it's, I have come from kind of the Magento world. I'm trying to understand the Shopify ecosystem a little better these days. But like the thing that Shopify brings to the table by owning the checkout and limiting what can be done there is massive, right? Because so many of these custom Magento implementations manage to screw things up one way or another, and your checkout goes down or whatever. And so fixing that problem was a huge problem to fix. I mean, across e-commerce generally. And
Yes.
I'd imagine that at the scale that they're at and all the things they're dealing with, it's a hard problem to solve. And I saw a thread, today where, they were talking about how they may have missed a deadline in 2019 for this, but they really wanted to get it right and things like
Hmm.
that. And it's a tough thing to solve at that scale. So it's cool to see the progress that's being made there.
Yes, and
And
we're working with them now at a completely different level than we used to, right? So
yeah,
we're in each other's Slack, and we are working together and coming up with ideas, and that's happening across a few other apps as well. And so we're transitioning. Our current product ran into the same issue that you're talking about that Shopify's checkout solved. Running a checkout is no
no
joke.
fun.
It is really, and we worked at it for a long time and got it to the point where now that that product is on a $1 billion annual run rate of
Holy
processing.
cow. Yeah.
And
That's
that
awesome.
was a huge challenge. And then now multiply that by many times over, and that's what Shopify did for e-commerce. They solidified the
Yeah.
reliability of the checkout, and
Yeah.
that's what gives you the ability to start expanding out toward the front end and toward the back end. And yes.
All the ends, all the different ends. Yeah, no, it's super cool. And talking a little bit about your team and stuff like that. Like, I'd love to know more about like your team, how things are going right now, sort of working COVID remotely. I mean, you started to touch on that with just being really proactive about checking in with people and stuff like that. But what's the team like? Is it distributed? Where's everybody located and things like that?
Sure. So we going into COVID, we had what we thought of as a pretty nice situation where we had two offices. We have a customer team here in Portland and a engineering team in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. And we had this remote hybrid where we had two different offices that were like, the challenge there turned into, how do you prevent it from becoming what feels like two companies working on the same product?
Hmm.
Because now you have office cultures that are happening in separate offices for better and worse. And we had a lot of trouble figuring out that communication and that interplay and, the way product sits in between everything. And COVID just threw that out the window. We always had plans to go remote, and we wanted to bring that asynchronous element into our work overall.
Hmm.
And then COVID just accelerated it. So as soon as it hit and no one was going into the offices anymore, we just started hiring remotely. So we went from this co-located to now fully remote, people in Austria, Croatia,
Croatia's a hot
Portugal,
spot. Yeah.
Spain. Yeah,
Yeah.
Croatia's
Yeah.
awesome. Los Angeles. So now we're remote, and we're better for it. And now
Yeah.
our hiring is opened up tremendously.
Yeah.
Just the talent pool.
Yeah, that's super interesting because there like it's like remote is kind of like a spectrum. Like I find that like there's companies that there's one random person on their team who's remote because they used to be in the office and then they moved to St. Louis or something like that. And then
Yes.
there's people that are fully distributed every time zone from to Asia and Oceania and everything in between. And like everybody exists somewhere. And there's different challenges as you go from, like you were saying, kind of that two different offices remote to like distributed remote. So how's that transition been going for you?
It's challenging. It's been great in many ways and really challenging in others. It really feels like the big difference now is between synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we still have a pretty synchronous nature to our company. I personally, I'm 40, and I feel like that age gap between where I am and maybe the average age in the company is somewhere around 32 or so.
Mhm.
And that gap is big enough where they are much more digitally native than I am.
Okay.
Where I like people, I like
You want to get on a
meetings, I
phone
like
call
sitting.
and do a meeting
I want
and
to be
stuff.
in person, man. I want to be in
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
That's my superpower, sitting next to someone
Yeah.
and walking past someone and seeing the look on their face and understanding, ooh, that's not quite their regular selves. Let me check in with them. And
Right.
that stuff being pulled out from under me shook me at first because I didn't understand, but how do I keep track? How do I know what people need? And so they had a much easier time than I did.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of work with a people coach, and we
That's
implemented a lot of things. We implemented a piece of software called 15.5,
Okay.
which which is very helpful because one-on-ones were happening in the company, but they weren't centralized and documented, and I had very little visibility. Always feared finding out that someone, 2 layers away from me became really unhappy and wants to leave the company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to know that well before it happens, so you can either help them transition out to the right thing for them or prevent it and make course correct.
Yep.
And I just felt like I had no visibility. I was at home, and so tools like 15.5 really helped with that visibility and standardization. And these are the one-on-one questions, and this is the cadence.
Yeah. I think 15.5 sounds familiar. It basically helps you to coordinate your one-on-ones across the team, kind of a thing. And
weekly check-in. Weekly check-in, that's what the 15.5 is, and then one-on-ones. And then it also creates a more public forum for giving kudos to people,
mm-hmm.
which doesn't happen enough.
Mm-hmm.
Slack tends to be like, it's hardcore activity. Like, what do I need? Here's this thing this customer needs here. Here's the ticket. Here's the JIRA. And it's like boom, 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 boom. It's very quick. It's hard to take the time out to be like, Lucy did an amazing job on this blog post. I want to thank her for it.
Yeah.
And 15.5 gives a space for that. It also allows you to very easily add things into the upcoming one-on-one. So if Emily and I have a one-on-one and I think of something and I don't need to drop it in Slack. I don't need to disturb her day, but I do want to cover it next time we talk. You could add it in there.
Right.
Yep. It's very well done, actually.
Yeah. It's like those little things, with all software, like, it's like those little touches that make a piece of software easier to use and make it easier. Like the amount of times I do that mentally where there's something I want to talk to my wife about, or there's sometimes I'll email her and feel like an idiot, or there's somebody, and to have an easy place to put it so you can come back to it when you need to without distracting them. Slack, everybody uses Slack. Everybody has a love-hate relationship with it because, and like, I'm real big on asynchronous. Like, I try to turn a lot of my notifications off and I don't really work with a team so much. I kind of mostly solo, but I think that's a tough balance to find, and a lot of people want to be able to get that quick response to if something's up, but not disrupting people is a tricky balance to find,
Yes. And of course, right as we started to get our act together on this front, everything got thrown out the window as soon as the Shopify agreement came through. And then what we did is we siloed off and hired a completely separate team to build it, because it's not the same Carthook app that we're running.
It's a bit of a separate deal.
It's completely separate because it's the Carthook app is a full checkout suite that includes the payment processing and everything.
Right.
And we weren't going to try to mold that into a new app that works inside their checkout.
Totally.
So all of a sudden we went on this mad sprint to build a new product in like 6 weeks while running an $80 million a month checkout. So it's been a little crazy.
That does sound, I mean, it's basically, hey, can you build another product real quick while maintaining your other, product with pretty huge infrastructure, right?
So we were fortunate in that in the evolution of the company, a year ago, we would have been a lot less prepared to do that. Whereas now the team is much more built out and self-sufficient that can just continue running without our constant watching it. Like, that team is just capable.
Right.
And so in many ways, it's been very rewarding because we're taking 4 years of experience and we get to start from scratch, which is a fantasy, because all software goes in the same direction, toward hell. Like, it doesn't get better. It's like, it's great for the first 6 months, then you release it, and from that point on, it starts to deteriorate toward hell
progressively.
So we're 4 years in, so things are messy. And so the ability to just wash all of it away and take all of our learning and our concepts and put into this, and now we finally have resources now that we didn't back then. All of a sudden we're working with amazing designers, and it's it is satisfying.
It's not like you're starting a new thing with some uncertainty around is this going to work? Is there a market for this? I mean, it's clearly going to work. It's clearly there's a market for it. You've got built-in distribution through the partner program. So it's kind of like the best of all worlds and on so many levels. Nice, fresh, code base and stuff like that. So
it's high stakes, but it is fun. And the people that just joined the company, they were basically asked to welcome. walk in the door and begin sprinting. It was very straightforward. But they also came into a brand new company and they're interacting directly with Shopify CTO, and like it's
Right. That's
so they're
wild.
right in the limelight. And oh, by the way, this announcement's going out to about 1 million stores in 2 months, so don't mess anything up. It's been wild, but it's fun.
Yeah. How many people are in your company roughly?
They're 27 now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. Started off just a handful of us. Really weren't sure what it was. We raised like 250 grand from friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to get onto the VC track.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we're just pretty much aiming to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And then it morphed and it changed and it grew. And then the satisfaction that came with managing was completely unexpected for me.
Really?
Right. I went into it like, all I care about is revenue per employee. I want efficiency, right? I'm looking for 500K per employee. I want 10 of us and it shifted around. And you know what it was? If I'm going to be honest, it took me a bit to readjust. As we got to about 5 or 6 or so employees, my co-founder in the business, Ben, came to me and basically said, so Jordan, I think we need to start going beyond money as our motivator. We're hiring people that want an amazing place to work. Like, we're the founders, and like, yes, this huge sacrifice is at least in part for financial gain, but that's not enough. And that really helped and shook me up and helped me look for more meaning in the company. But I wasn't prepared to fake it and just be like, well, we're making the world a better place and call it a day. Like, right, I wasn't ready to do that. So I needed to find an authentic channel for it. And it really turned into, well, what we do is we help these small businesses become more successful. And that's good for them. It's good for their employees. It's good for their community. And that's I'm good with that right there. I think making the world a better place by giving people a better living and more successful businesses, that's plenty for me. I'm not trying to solve climate change. If I make people's lives better and they can afford to send their kids, like all that trickle that happens.
Yeah.
And that became my authentic thing. And then it spread out into the team entirely. And then it took on a life of its own. And I got an unexpected amount of satisfaction from managing and watching people grow and watching people get better at what they do and challenging myself to figure out how to do all that. And that was like the most unexpected part of the whole thing.
That's really cool, man. I feel like I've found some of that. I feel like the last maybe 2 years, I've been struggling with finding some of those deeper purposes and sort of, I'm 39, I'll be 40 real soon. And just following a certain trajectory of work. And then having a chance to take a breather and step back. And for me, it kind of sucked. Like not knowing what to do with myself, not knowing what I wanted to do, having extra time on my hands as I pull back from work and things like that. And it was kind of brutal, but I feel like on the other end of that, I've found some more connection to some of the deeper things I care about, like connecting with other people and creativity and some coding and kind of finding the right mix and balance.
Yes.
Has been cool. And I think a lot of times, like, it's so funny what you said. Like, a lot of times people might try to tack on that, like, yeah, we're going to also save the world, but it's not.
I couldn't stomach that version of things.
Yeah.
Yes. And you see it from a mile away and it just feels all wrong. And I didn't want to be that guy. I couldn't do it in a fake way. So I really had to figure it out.
Yeah. Have you been able to, you're talking about going back to the thing about the shift from in-person to remotely kind of interfacing and the video calls and the one-on-ones. Have you been able to translate to what extent have you been able to translate that in person, look at their expression on their face, see how people are doing, to the video calls, the one-on-ones? Because video calls they're not exactly the same, but they can be great if you can make them work,
Yeah, there's nothing like in person, but if that's not going to happen, then what's the next best thing? And look, Zoom is winning Wall Street and everything because it is the next best thing. I would say I'm not satisfied with it, but I'm learning to live with it because I just have to.
Don't have any choices.
Really, don't. You're right. You don't have a choice. What it's been for me is additional trust in the managers. So I had a problem at first where I would tell the manager and telegraph it and everything. All my messaging was, I trust you to run this department. You're in charge. Let me know whatever you need. But then I would find myself being like, well, I'm concerned about that individual contributor that works for the manager. And so let me just reach out because I care about them. And I want to say, how are you? How was your weekend? Are you worried about this upcoming thing? And what I realized was I was just undermining the manager every time.
Yeah.
And look, personal stuff, how was your weekend? All good. But when the second you cross over into work, if you
which is easy to do, which is so easy to do.
It's right
work
there.
On the,
right.
Yeah, you got the same priorities. You're thinking about these things.
And you do genuinely care. I'm concerned about this person. They just worked on this blog post, and I told them, you know what? For strategic reasons, I don't want to publish it. You just did a week of work, and I'm just going to tell you I'm going to scrap it away because I feel like it. Things like that are like, every once in a while those things happen, or a customer is a jerk to someone. And I want to check in to see how they are and like not to take it personally. I don't know. I'm coming up with examples. But every time you go around the manager, you're telling the manager, I actually don't trust you. I say I do, but I don't. And so this is a similar thing where now I have to rely even more heavily on the leadership and give the message to them. It's almost like I don't need to tell them to care about the people that work for them, right? That's not a necessary thing, but I'm trying to make sure this is how we think about it. This is how we think about people. This is why we care. This is how we want to be. This is the type of company we want to be, and then trust from there.
Yeah. Do you find that as like maybe you're spending less time on certain things that you would have spent time on in person, right? So what are you funneling that time towards or that energy towards as the CEO? Like a lot of these things are things you need to do less of. What are some of the things you're finding that you can do more of, throw yourself into more, whether that's strategy or,
Yes, it has become pretty clear to myself and to the people I work with that I am mostly useless. When it comes to day-to-day execution, if you rely on Jordan to get you that thing he told you he would get you, you're going to be waiting for a while. I'm genuinely bad at it. I happen to be very good at a few things and very bad at most other things. And it's been a great realization, and the ability to be self-deprecating in that way and just identify it has been good. And what it's turned into is a company that is not reliant on me for very much at all.
Right.
Once they got up and running and they're running their team, they're genuinely better at it than I am. And I get out of their way. And then they don't really rely on me for day to day, partly because they don't want to rely on me, but also because it's not necessary. Yeah. And so what I've ended up doing is what I've always wanted to do, which is think. And what that usually means for me is thinking about the future. And what I end up doing is I end up talking to a lot of people, and I end up formulating a vision and a hypothesis on the future that guides the product and the company toward what I think is going to happen in the future, right? Mm-hmm. Post-purchase upsells for physical products were not a thing. And I saw, because I wasn't as involved in the day-to-day, I saw what was happening in ClickFunnels, and I saw a lot of people loving the freedom that ClickFunnels gave them, but ClickFunnels didn't have a good backend for e-commerce. No inventory, shipping, fulfillment, none of those concepts existed in the software. Yep. So then people went to Shopify, which at the time and still is the best way to run a physical product business without a huge build. And so in between those two was the opportunity to provide Shopify merchants with ClickFunnels strategies. And that's why our product exists.
Yeah.
And so if I'm in the day-to-day, I don't see that the same way. But if I'm in the Facebook group, snooping around, identifying people that need this, DMing them, getting them on a call, figuring out why they want it, triangulating that with another 5 conversations, I form these ideas that you can't if you're doing the day-to-day work.
Right.
And so that's where I like to live.
Nice. So is that basically then like customer research, customer development? Like when you're talking about Facebook groups, are you, kind of talking to potential customers, actual customers, and then thinking through product direction, that kind of thing?
Yes, exactly right. It's testing hypothesis. I think it's going in this direction, but what I think is, step one. Now let me
Mhm.
talk to people who are operating businesses actively who have a very different set of priorities than I do, and then I either reject or accept these like little ideas and hypotheses.
Right.
So that's what I like to do, and then right there's always the element of these partnerships, and um, I tell my team to use me when I'm useful. If you want to be able to say, I'm going to connect you with my CEO and that's useful for you in the sales process, then use me for that.
Right. Right.
So it's that and worrying about what people think, but it is generally less and less and less actual day-to-day work. And I'm
Right.
okay with that. I have no
Right.
shame about that.
Right. That's actually cool because I feel like the classical CEO answer to that would be like, I'm going to focus on sales. And it sounds like there's obviously a component that you do. I mean, you seem like you probably sell very well. But like the way that you positioned that was different. It was more like I'm in the Facebook group, I'm doing customer development, I'm triangulating. So that's like I feel like that's a unique approach and skill set that it's not just I'm going to do a bunch of sales, a bunch of talking, but that's a very valuable skill set of seeing the gaps, identifying them, being able to jump into sales, but then also really thinking a lot about that customer development. Like that's cool.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's just being comfortable with figuring out what you're good at and going with it without feeling guilty that you're not doing things the way people on Twitter say you should be doing them. Right.
Yeah.
For me, a flow state is like 4 Zoom calls in a day with a VC, a partner,
Nice.
a friend, and then a podcast. And for me, that gives me the energy and the intellectual curiosity to explore.
Right.
And
Right.
so what if I don't have my inbox in order and my to-do list is a yellow pad? Like I'm done feeling guilty about who I am and just kind of leaning into this is what I like to do. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. I think about flow state stuff all the time. And as a developer myself, like my flow state can be tied into development or things like that. But I also like conversations and stuff as well. But I can like see like the energy that you have just talking and getting into a conversation and stuff.
That's what I like. Yes.
Yeah. It's so important for people to find their like flow state. Like I'm so big on that. And I feel like so many people operate in some capacity where they're constantly getting interrupted. They're getting pulled into things that are kind of suboptimal for them. Like I just love the idea, whether it's the CEO, the developer, the customer service, whatever. Like I feel like the future of humanity is like everybody in an optimal flow state, knowing exactly what they want to do.
Yes.
Whether
what they're
it's
most talented in.
what they're most talented, what they most enjoy, that intersection. And everybody just going for it, just going at it and bringing their unique talents to the table and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's a nice thought to have people doing work that they like to do, regardless of the position. I think the thing I like the most about the CEO position is that it just changes and changes and changes and changes every few months. And so that, before this company, I really was starting a different company every 2 years or so.
Okay.
And I never really got all the way in and allowed all those different changes to happen, like along with the need of the company. I would start something, make some money, maybe sell it, maybe drop it. Like I didn't go deep enough.
Yeah.
And now every year is completely different. So when it started, I was doing the sales and I loved it. And at some point I remember closing.
And it was just the money. Like you were just like, let me just make money. That was the initial focus.
Yes. And I didn't have the trust. I was like, this is a big customer. I have to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was convinced. I was like, I remember the last big customer I closed was Native Deodorant. And I negotiated with Moise, who is no fun to negotiate with. He's gonna win
Tough
the negotiation. Yes, he's tough. Exactly right. Well, he understands his value. Like money is cool, but if you want Native to be on Carthook, I know that's worth something to you, and I'm going to use that leverage, rightfully so.
Right.
And I remember that being like the last big customer. And then a few months ago, we closed our biggest customer ever. A brand that does like $15 million a month, much bigger. And I didn't even talk to them at all. And I was like,
that's wild.
I crossed over.
You crossed over.
Yeah. I remember
that's amazing.
one of my most memorable moments in running the company was we were at WeWork. I think it was about 5 of us or 6 of us in a WeWork office that was shared with another company that we had gone through like a Portland incubator together. So it was like 6 of us and 15 of them. And I got stuck. I couldn't find a room. I had to do the demo in the open in this room with everybody.
Okay.
And this was at the point where the product was working, and I had done 3 demos a day for 6 months, and I was polished up, man. And I put on a clinic for 30 minutes in front of all my employees and the entire of the company. And the demo went absolutely perfectly. And at the very end, I got the sale, hung up, and people like looked over and clapped. And I was like, that's how you do it.
Nice.
And that was
like a scene out of a movie.
Yes. And it was like, they hadn't really seen me do it. And it was important for them to be like, oh, so that's what it looks like when the boss man like turns it on.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, that's the wrong thing. 6 months later, it's no. I need to make sure that Emily knows how to do that.
Right.
And then when she hires someone, I need to make sure that Emily knows how to do that to the point of training Katie, and then Katie can do it without me even knowing about it.
Yeah.
So it's like within 6 months, the whole thing, like what was once a hero moment is now like, oh, that's the completely wrong thing.
Yeah, because then if you kind of stay in that mode, always wanting to be the hero, because everybody wants to be the hero, but it's like you got to let that go.
Yes.
Because if you stay in that, always wanting to be the hero, then it becomes sort of too centered around yourself and kind of egocentric, and then the company can't. Yeah.
Exactly right.
I noticed that you had mentioned you were talking about looking for kind of a format for your all hands meeting, or kind of like finding
that's right
a good format for your all hands. I'm curious to kind of dive into that a little bit, and curious what you found.
So we have a limited number of opportunities to get everyone together and to make it feel like one company, as opposed to 2 separate companies working on the same product, right? And we wanted to take all hands as one of these important opportunities for each team to get a glimpse into what the other is working on and what they care about and what they're feeling and hearing and what their job is like. And we ended up with this format that we thought did that, and it served us well for a little while, where what we did is we broke it up into teams, and these individual leaders on these teams would do a quick presentation. And so I would kick things off, and we'd have a little bit of social fun for a few minutes. And then I'd give a company update. Mm-hmm. I'd talk about KPIs, mm-hmm. and I'm very, very open. Everyone knows exactly how much the revenue is, all that stuff, the churn, mm-hmm. the growth, all mm-hmm. that. And then I would get into like a what's next, like what's in store for the future for us. Mm-hmm. And then each team would go. And it just went stale on us. Mm-hmm. It turned into basically 60 minutes of 20 people watching the screen and one person talking at a time, and everyone just kind of staring at the screen. Mm-hmm. And so we needed to evolve beyond it. And that's when I went to Twitter and just started to look like, okay, how do we do this? And what we've ended up doing is minimizing the number of teams. We don't go into nearly as much depth. We have a Q&A session that people can ask myself and the team leads. We're trying to highlight more fun stuff, anniversaries around how long someone's been at the company, births, people going on maternity leave, like just injecting more of a social element to it as well, and less, here's the information you need to know. It is an opportunity for me to reiterate the vision, and there's no such thing as doing that often enough. So I'm happy to basically repeat myself over and over and over again. Yeah, but it's still evolving. I don't think it's great.
Yeah, meetings are like tough. Like a lot of people just don't like meetings. Remote meetings are hard to do, but there is value in, getting people on the same page and stuff like that. So it's like, it's tough to find that right balance,
I don't know how these large companies do it. How does Zapier, whatever, 400 plus employees, how do you do it in such a way that people feel like they're part of something?
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Where they're not just phoning it in and like doing like,
this is my job, like doing something else, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. These days, the something that millennials that are often derided, something that they should get a lot of credit for, is that they genuinely care. They aren't just saying, I want to do something meaningful. Like they are giving up higher salaries to do things that they care about.
Right.
And you look at it, it's easy for someone our age to kind of dismiss that as like, oh, young naivete, great. But they mean it. And you have to give credit for that earnestness. Yeah. And then you realize, all right, well, if you want them to work at your company, you need to give them more than just the salary.
Yeah.
And that makes you look inward around, well, what are we doing here? What's the point of this thing beyond making revenue? And
it's so funny because for the longest time I was like, oh, millennial, everybody's made the millennial jokes, like, these millennials, and then I found out I'm 1981. So I'm actually on the tail end of the technical definition of a millennial. I'm one of those like almost 40-year-old millennials, but I think of myself as the other generation. But then the weird thing is, and this is something I started seeing myself in probably the last several years, is I do actually have a lot of those tendencies of wanting to have a sense of independence, wanting to live in random places, wanting to do work that I care about, not maximizing all the time for money. And I was like, holy crap. Like I'm a millennial. Like what the hell?
It's not a bad thing. It is a tendency toward balance, toward more balance.
That's exactly what it is.
Yes. Yeah. And I experienced that. My first job was in investment banking. Okay. And it was so obvious that I made a mistake. And what I did was I got the balance wrong. I thought for sure that what I was most interested in was money. Mm-hmm. And I went to business school, and all my peers were going into banking or consulting. Literally 2 jobs. That's what you have. Those are the options in the world. You're either a consultant or a banker. That's it. So I chose banking. I don't know why. So I went in and was beyond miserable, several steps beyond miserable. I was the guy, 2-year analyst program at Solomon Smith Barney. I was the guy that exactly 1 year in is refreshing the bank account. And as soon as the first annual bonus hits, stand up, walk into my boss's office and quit. And he was like, this is a 2-year program, right? I'm like, no, not for me, sir. So that was a punch in the face on balance. It was like, guess what? You found one limit. Money, not okay to give up everything just for that. Okay, now you know that, tuck that away and carry on.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, now that you say that, I can kind of imagine you as that young investment banker.
Such a mistake. Such a mistake. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in an immigrant entrepreneur household. What was I doing going into? I should have gone to work for a 20-person company and really gotten a chance to see what it is. Yeah. You want to run a company? Let's go see what it's like to work for a company that's being run by someone that you can kind of point to and be like, I know you. Can we go to lunch? Can I ask you questions?
Yeah.
I did not get that right.
It's like hindsight is 20/20, and you never know those things that shaped you. And if you hadn't experienced that, you wouldn't have known why it sucked viscerally enough to really care about what you care about now. So how do you think about? I think a lot about like with our kids, their education stuff. We actually homeschool and stuff like that. So we're a little wacky, but
I think it's admirable.
It's I think so too.
Now getting a taste of it's admirable.
Yeah, exactly. And my wife is great. She's just always wanted to do that, to really just pour as much as possible into them. And I think a lot about, I've had, I went to school, went to college, did a little bit of a traditional route, but then I've had a little bit of a non-traditional career, starting a businesses, that kind of a thing. And being kind of entrepreneurial, I think about and then everything that's happening with the cost of education for kids is insane. So I'm like, what direction am I going to encourage my kids to go in? My oldest daughter is 11. She's brilliant. She's very social. She loves dance. She loves arts and things like that. I wanted to get her into coding. I tried to teach her to code a few times, but it didn't really take. So trying to find her natural interests and think about, I think there's certain careers, like if she wanted to be a nurse, where absolutely go to school, that's the direction to go. But I think there's a lot of other things, like I'm trying to get her to start an Etsy store. I want her to start a Shopify. Like I want her to do stuff like that. There's so many routes where you wouldn't necessarily make sense to pay for $200,000 for a college degree. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how do you think about all that? Things are changing so rapidly.
I think about it a lot. I have 3 daughters, ages 4, 6, and 8. So I have a little bit of time to think about it, but not that much.
You guys timed that out very well.
We did. It's like boom, February, boom, boom. March. In March, it's like 2 years, done. So I think about it a lot. And like you can't help but have some desire to have an impact on it and introduce them to things and show them. And they are their individual selves. And it's an individual life, and it's not yours to mold, right? But you do have an impact on it in terms of guidance. And I see it as my job almost to make them aware of opportunities and possibilities, right? My parents had a narrower definition of that. They came over here from Israel, and it was like a lot of pressure on us, the kids, there still is, that they didn't come here for nothing. They didn't come here for you to be average.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of that, on my shoulders, the same way with my siblings.
Yeah.
I don't want that for my kids because that's not the same story.
Yeah.
For me, it's almost the job is like, make sure they understand that there is an enormous range of possibilities, and they don't have to settle, and they don't have to choose like a narrow thing. I do introduce them to entrepreneurial concepts whenever it's available. I don't shove it down their throat, but they've been to my office. They come visit during the day, and they'll see a bunch of people working there. And they are at the age where they're curious. What is this? Like, what is happening here? And for them to understand the concept of daddy's business pays their salaries. It also pays daddy's salary. And they were kind of blown away by these concepts. Or I'm like, I don't understand. So you pay for everyone? Like, no, I don't. The business does. The business is separate from me, but I started it. So all these things are
Here's
kind of
how corporations work.
Yes, they're fascinated by it. And I'm like, well, we have to make more money than we pay. Otherwise, we don't have. So it is fun introducing them to the concepts.
Yeah.
I have a lot to figure out. You're a few years ahead. There's a lot more on the education front. Man, I don't know. I went to Michigan. I paid a ridiculous amount of money. I got a scholarship to Maryland and a few other schools. And I said, nope, Michigan's the place for me. I'm going to pay out of my nose, and I'm going to come out of there with debt and everything.
Yeah.
But it changed the trajectory of my life, my friends. I met my wife there, the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's no way I can say that it wasn't worth it. I cannot say that. The education, really close to useless. Like right, there's useless, and there's one
right
little step over.
Yeah.
Yes. All of the education I could have gotten elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I can't discount the experience. So if my daughter comes to me and says, Dad, I want to go to, I don't know, UCLA, I like to think intellectually that I'll be like, well, I don't know if that's the smartest thing. You should take a gap year. You should explore the world. You should start at this. I don't know if that's my place to do it. So I have no idea what's going to happen. How's that?
Yeah. I think that's probably the only honest answer any of us can give. I mean, things are changing so fast. It's funny because everybody sort of says the same thing, which is that so much of the value of the university, the college you went to, is the network. No. And everybody sort of knows that. And I think I sort of think about taking these things and kind of breaking them down into components. So I think networking is so important. I mean, we know that as business people, like to learn to network, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with it. It's difficult to do. Some are better than others at it. I think it's such an important skill. Like I imagine teaching my kids how to network really well and to go to different events and meet people and, and like combine the social network aspect with meeting people in real life and stuff like that. So I kind of think about how to recreate a lot of those positives of the college experience in different ways. But yeah, it's a tricky thing to figure out. I think we're just about at our time here. So it was a blast finally getting a chance to talk with you. I know a bunch of people that know you and stuff like that, and I've always heard great things about you. So
I feel like I know you. Like Twitter's the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where's the best place for people to kind of find you online?
So at Jordan Gall on Twitter. You can check out carthook.com. I also have a podcast I do with my good friend Brian Castle called Bootstrapped Web, where we talk about basically what we learn every week. We call it the Lowlights podcast. Like we do not highlight all the amazing things we do. We highlight all the things that we messed up and what we're learning and struggling with, nice. which I like that version of things. That's it. Thank you very much for having me on. It's fun.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it.